The public comment is entered by Huda Hassan, CTE coordinator, Ted Milano, EMT instructor, Kathleen Purdock, aviation instructor at the Pinecrest Academy of Nevada, requesting the removal of PRAXIS exams as a requirement for the CTE teachers with provisional licensing. These exams are designed to measure the skill and content knowledge of the teacher's teaching core subject and does not directly relate to any content or subject taught by CTE instructors. These instructors come directly from the industry with years of firsthand experience and knowledge of their craft. These are highly specialized people. Our EMT instructors has 22 years of field experience, 16 years as an EMT instructor, two very successful years setting up and teaching this program as a Saloon Canyon campus. He is now required to take an English, math, and reading PRAXIS test in order to obtain or maintain his license, which is no way measured his compatibility as an EMT instructor. Our CTE teachers with their skill sets are hard to find as it is, and with the number of courses they have to take just to maintain their business and industry license is already more than enough. It takes them years to complete them. Moreover, they are continuously honoring their skills through various training programs related to the field. Those are my two public comments about that, President West. We do have two people here that are going to do public comment as well. I apologize about that.
Okay. And before you start, Ms. Johnson, I just wanted to finish the public comment from I Teach Nevada. It says, currently we have 303 candidates enrolled in our program across the state. That is not enough teachers to fully staff some of the small districts in Nevada. And the solution to approximately 20% of the vacancies in Nevada's largest district. 62 or 20% of the I Teach candidate pool are African American. Of those African American candidates, only 3 have passed and submitted all 3 sections of the core to I Teach. 36 or 12% of that candidate pool are Hispanic Latino. Of those Hispanic Latino candidates, only 7 candidates have passed and submitted all 3 sections of the core to I Teach. I find this data interesting when I know 100% of I Teach Nevada candidates have a bachelor's degree with a 2.5 GPA or higher from an accredited college or university, with a state average GPA of an average I Teach candidate being 3.01. To me, it begs the question, what is the core exam telling us about how talented, smart, prepared, or dedicated someone is that their undergraduate degree does not already tell us? At the risk of being presumptuous, I assume members of the board are disagreed individuals, and I believe most of us would argue getting through our undergraduate studies was no small feat. Many of us may even still be paying for this 4-year experience, both figuratively and literally. I also wonder if I have considered all the other measures that go into determining whether a teacher candidate is a good fit for a school or for the classroom. I've been fortunate enough to work with some of the funnest principals and former principals in the state of Nevada through I Teach, including the 2 who are giving testimony with me today. And I would fully trust their judgment in an interview process to ensure that they are staffing the best teachers that I can find. I also trust the HR directors we work with every day to vet the backgrounds, recommendations, and work with the life experiences of these individuals. Again, as a former principal, I can tell you right now that a warm body responsible for little more than ensuring a classroom does not devolve into chaos. It is not good enough for Nevada students. I know that this board and HRs I work with across the state would agree. But for the good of the candidates, no great candidates such as the Latina paras who have worked as aides in the kindergarten classroom for years, building curriculum and lessons, or the substitutes that stuck with us and taught us through the ups and downs and challenges of COVID, and for the bus drivers and paras who have displayed the ability to connect with students year after year. For these discrete candidates, let's consider the barrier the core presents and how truly it contributes to determining the effectiveness of an educator. The I Teach founder, Dr. Diane Huber, gave testimony at the April COPS meeting, and I concur with her sentiments and urge the Commission on Professional Standards to allow a conferred undergraduate degree to fulfill the demonstration of basic skills in reading, writing, and math requirement. Highest regards and thanks, Dr. Kimberly Thaggart, Western Director for iTeach. And I just wanted to make sure that her entire public comment made it into the record. Thank you.
Good morning, President West, members of the board. It's an honor to be here today. My name is Grant Hannavold. I'm the Chief Education Officer with the Public Education Foundation. I've been there for a little over 2 years. In my prior life, a couple of months ago, some of the research behind there's very little correlation between the PRAXIS testing, the competency testing, particularly the core test, and success as a teacher. What I find ironic as I'm listening to the testimony from what we've heard today and what I've been reviewing over the last several months is we've created systemic barriers again and again and again. We know that we disproportionately place students of color in accelerated classes as early as elementary and middle school. We know we disproportionately place our students of color into the most gifted and talented programs as they move on through their educational career. And we then look at the students that are moving on and going to college. We have now created a system where we disproportionately create a barrier for our teachers of color. And it bothers me that I worked for 30 years in the Clark County School District, and I never really looked deeply into the hiring practices and the elimination of some of these candidates, because as I've had time to look at and review the research now, we've known this for 20 years. These systemic barriers have been here, and we've just allowed it to continue. And I guess I'm privileged to work where I do now, where I have the time to really do the research and look into the why behind why there are some systemic issues that we seem as a society that we know they're there. We know that teachers of color are good for not only students of color, but for our white students as well. All the research points that bringing more teachers of color into the profession is for all kids. And yet we create systemic barriers that eliminate teachers of color from entering the profession. It's just absolutely bizarre to me that we haven't learned our lesson and that we find ourselves back in this same place, having these same discussions when we know the answers. We're the educators, for God's sakes. We should know how to solve these problems when it comes to public education. I want to share some other information I didn't know until I did some research. Currently, there are 20 states that do not require the PRAXIS core in order to obtain a teacher certification. Ironically, 4 of those states border Nevada: Arizona, Utah, Idaho, and Oregon. In fact, there isn't a state west of Colorado that requires the PRAXIS core to become a licensed teacher. Some will say, well, California requires it, and they do. However, they offer alternative courses in lieu of the PRAXIS if you cannot pass the core. So literally every state west of Colorado, the only other one that's somewhat unique is New Mexico, which, like California, requires the PRAXIS, but also has an alternative course that you can take in lieu of the PRAXIS should you struggle. Given the crisis we are in, and with the recruitment and the retention, there is literally no plausible reason that we would leave the PRAXIS requirement in place for a standard license. Talking about our state specifically, I was not aware until about a year ago that you couldn't even student teach as an elementary education major until you passed the PRAXIS core. And there's no data. I've looked for it. I can't find the data of how many people dropped out of being an elementary teacher because they couldn't pass the PRAXIS prior to even being able to student teach. So I have no idea how many we lost over the last decades because of that rule. However, if you were an early childhood or a special education major, you could student teach, obtain a teaching job, and then have 3 years to pass both the PRAXIS 1 and the PRAXIS 2. I cannot understand the inconsistency, but I am glad that we have been able to fill the high needs areas of early childhood and special education. I know provisional licensing is coming up on one of your agenda items today, and I applaud the efforts you're considering to remove the barriers for the ARL. I thank you for that. I think that is everything right that we should be doing. But if we're going to extend that 3-year provisional courtesy to our ARL candidates, which is the right thing to do, I sure hope you'll consider doing the same for our current aspiring elementary educators. allow them to student teach, begin teaching with a provisional license. Neglecting those elementary education majors is just baffling to me, because literally we won't let you into the profession if you can't pass the proficiency exam before you even student teach. But if you had a general studies degree and you wanted to enter teaching through the ARL route, the competency requirements would be removed. Think about that for a second. The ones that are actually we are making it more difficult to be an educator if you pursue a degree in education than we are if you pursue a degree in a non-education field.